Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. From Silverfort, we have Ido Halevi. He is Director of Product Management, and he's joined by Yoav Yellen, Innovation Team Leader over at Silverfort. So, Ido, I'm going to pass it over you to get things started with the presentations, and I'm looking forward to this. I'll catch you for the Q&A.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for having us. Very excited to be here, and thank you everyone for joining the call. Today, what we want to discuss is how different AI agent identities are architected in different cloud providers. And we'll walk you through a day in the life of an AI agent just to showcase what we found in Silverfort and what we think is important when you're treating AI agent identities. So let's get started. So let me introduce you to someone who works at your company. They authenticate to your system, they have permissions, they show up in audit logs, they were never onboarded by HR, and they don't have a manager. Those agents, they can approve expenses, they can read files, they can sometimes even deploy code or send emails on behalf of your employees. And they're doing stuff not because they are malicious, right? But because we ask them to do that. And what I would like to walk you through today is, do you actually know which identity those agents are using at the moment of action? And can you answer it consistently across different cloud providers, whether it's AWS, Azure, and GCP? So let's take our first agent. That's your AWS Bedrock agent, and we'll start the day with it. It's called Amy. And my question to you is, which IAM role does your agent use, right? And who configure them? So let's see what's going on in AWS. In Bedrock, the agent has an agent execution role. I guess you all know that. And that's the primary identity you created. But if the agent is using any tools, and sometimes those tools, for example, can be implemented on top of Lambda function, the agent is actually using an indirect role, the Lambda execution role, right? And sometimes those agents also use an API. That's an additional role. Okay? So we have one agent, but potentially we have 3 IAM roles, and none of these roles on their own represent the agent itself as a single accountable identity, right? So again, an agent has one main execution role, but an agent with just a role, but without any actions or tools, can do nothing. And sometimes the roles of the tools themselves are also important to understand what the agent can do. So here is what AWS can offer you, right? You get full visibility. You can see exactly what the agent is allowed to access through IAM policies. You get full control because you created and you manage those tools, so those rules. And you get full responsibility. If something goes wrong, you configure it. The key risk in AWS is not the an hidden behavior, right? It's an over permission and sprawl. Most teams usually start with broad permissions to get it working, and they never go back to right-sizing them when they need to. Great. So we continue our day. This time the agent is working on Azure. And when Alex, the agent, is trying to access SharePoint, whose permission is it actually using? Is it the user, yours, or its own? So let's use the agent in Azure running in Copilot Studio as an example. It has a user that asks it to summarize the sales pipeline and send an email. But how does it actually work behind the scenes? Okay. The agent first is doing an action to read the CRM data. Okay. To do that, it uses what we call the maker credentials, whoever set up the connector. That person can be an admin with broad access. Second, just for internal monitoring, the agent posts a summary on Teams. Okay. To do that, the agent is acting on its behalf, the bot's own identity, not the user identity. And third, because we want to send the email to our manager, and it should be a personal email, the agent is using the user delegated permission, okay? Because the email, again, is personal. So in one simple prompt, what we found out is behind the scene, the agent does 3 actions, but uses 3 different identities in the same context, in one conversation. So what Azure, and here is the deal with Microsoft, right? They want to allow for maximum flexibility, and that's because they usually work with a lot of big enterprise environments that are very, very complex. And each one or each connector needs different authentication model, right? Sometimes the user should authenticate, sometimes it's a server's account, sometimes it's a person who built the agent, and Microsoft lets you do all 3 of them. And that flexibility is very powerful when you think about integration, right? But it also creates a very specific risk. If the maker, the person who set up the connector, has elevated permission, then every user of that agent inherited those permissions for that action. So for example, if you have a junior employee ask for the sales summary, just like the example that I showed previously, then the agent can access data using the admin's credential, okay? The audit log, if you search for the logs, will also show you that the admin was doing the action and not the junior employee or the agent itself, okay? And it's not the bug, right? This is exactly how the system is designed. And most teams don't realize which mode each connector is using until something really happens, right? Because it can be very confusing. In one prompt, just like I showed before, you can have 3 different identities used by the same agent. Good. So now we continue our day, and we got to our agent in GCP Vertex AI. So in AWS, we talked about role sprawl, right? And in Azure, we talked about identity confusion, what I like to call. In GCP, I want to ask you about blast radius. If one agent is compromised, how many others are affected? Anyone knows the answer? Okay. So now our agent is in GCP. It's running on Vertex AI, processing some analytics data. And here is a critical choice that you have to make, right? And most teams don't even realize that they are making it or they need to take that call. And that's option 1, create your custom service account for that specific agent, the agent that you just deployed. What it will provide you is a very good isolation, okay? Each agent has its own identity. The second option is to use the default service account, the one that Google manages, okay? And the problem with the default service account, the one that Google manages, is that it's project scoped, shared across all agents in that project, okay? So again, if you didn't explicitly configure a custom service account, you're probably using the default one, right? And then you are in a danger of a risk sharing that same service principle across all the agents in the same project. So if one is exposed, all of them are exposed. So what GCP actually provides you, right? And what they believe. So GCP in a nutshell tries to provide you a managed infrastructure, right? They manages the runtime, okay? And you configure the identity, where the defaults can be danger to some extent, right? And the trade-off between how custom you want it to be and how much you get out of the box is usually around visibility. You can always opt for more visibility, but you'll have to do a lot of work for that, okay? Because Google will not service it by default. And the key risk there is, again, if you're using the default settings, sometimes one risk can affect all the agents in the same project, and that's by design, okay? So let's continue with our day, right? We spend the day watching our agent move across different clouds, and now something got wrong. Okay? We have an agent that accessed the data it shouldn't have, maybe took an action you didn't expect it to do, maybe you got an alert, right? And now let's try to summarize and see how you need to go and do the analysis and the investigation for each one of the cloud providers that we just went over. So let's walk through each platform, okay? In AWS, you check the CloudTrail, you find the role, you trace the action, right? It works, it's complex, but it's very doable. The data is there, you own the infrastructure, and you have all the tools and the visibility that you need to do it. In Azure, it gets a little bit more complex. Which log do you check? The agent service principal, the maker account, the user who triggered it, right? As you've seen in the previous example, and one agent can use multiple identities that usually logged in different places, okay? So you might need to check all three and then correlate between them manually. And that correlation is not a first-class object anywhere in Azure platform and the services that they offer. Okay. In GCP, you can check cloud login, but the runtime is managed by Google. Right? So you see what they surface. If you want more visibility, you can always do that. It will just require a lot more work out of you. Okay. And if you need more information in the execution context, you can't inspect it directly. You need to work for it. Okay. So again, who was this agent today? The answer is it really depends on the platform, the time of the day, the connector that was involved, and the setup that you had. So here is one thing I think we can learn from that, okay? Cloud providers are actually doing exactly what they were designed to do, okay? None of them is optimizing for your accountability model, right? They are optimizing for the platform correctness. So each one of those platforms provide logs, lots of logs, but the log completeness is not the same as attribution completeness, right? You can see what happens, but knowing who decided, who executed, and who was accountable, like I showed you before, that requires a little bit more stitching together inside each of those platforms, okay? And I really want to emphasize, it's not like it's a misconfiguration or a posture problem. You can't really fix it by just reading more documentation or writing better policies, right? It's actually how those systems are built. It's a mismatch between how platforms are modeling identities and how enterprises or customers need to model accountability, right? So I think what we can all understand for that or derive from that is and I want you to take a look at that, is why static IAM fails for agents. So in a nutshell, traditional IAM assumes predictable behavior, right? You grant permissions at config time, you audit at review time, you assume a workload does roughly the same thing around every day, right? The behavior is expected. But with AI agent and the uniqueness that they bring to the table is that they break those assumptions, right? They can reason, they can branch, they can retry something fails, they can even invent ways to do or to accomplish the task that it was sent to without you even thinking about it, right? And they can chain tools together in ways that was never anticipated before, right? So if you think about it, a permission that was safe at 10 a.m. in the morning can be dangerous 2 minutes afterwards, right? If an agent's trying to do something different than what you were expected, okay? So you can't really pre-approve every possible tool chain the agent will construct, right? That's like a fundamental mismatch. We have to do something better than that. in order to overcome the challenges that we see with AI agents compared to maybe a more regular NHI or a human behavior. So what do you actually need? Okay. And I think like the first step that we see and that we believe in is that first you need a map, right? Without a map, without a visibility, you can't really understand what's going on in your environment. So first you need to discover all of your agents, and I'm sure you all are aware of the shadow AI challenges that you have in your organization. Once you discovered everything, you need to make sure that the right information is there, right? That you can see every agent, that you can link to its direct identities or indirect identities, like the tools that it's using. It can be linked to the owner. I know Microsoft calls it a sponsor, so the human who's accountable for that agent. And if that agent is more like a chatbot-like type of interface, maybe you also need to link it to all the identities that are chatting with that agent as well, right? So a good base for all of that would be the visibility base. Then you need runtime enforcement, okay? So not just policies that you deploy, that you set and deploy, but some controls that can evaluate the context at the moment of the action, and based on that, decide whether you should enforce something or not. Okay. And then the third one, you need a clear view of what's going on, right? So you need one view that follows the agent and make sure that all those linkage, connections, etc., are mapped in a way that is easier for you to understand. Okay. And always, of course, ask yourself, who authorized this action, on whose behalf, with which privileges, and what moment, right? If you can't answer it today, trust me, you're not alone. We've seen it across so many companies in our day-to-day work. And it's not because it's that straightforward, right? Like I said, it's a capability gap most organizations are facing. So just to recap before the session ends, there are three main takeaways I would like you to take from today, okay? One, treat your agents as identities, okay? I know many companies are ignoring that, okay? Or at least it took them time to start thinking of agent as identities. In the beginning, we thought of them as NHIs or something like robotic identities, etc. But I think we should really treat them as their own identity, okay? They authenticate, they have permissions, they show up in your logs. Treat them with the same rigor as you apply to any other privileged identity, okay? Because they are privileged by their undeterministic behavior. Second, each platform model identity differently. Okay, so if you are multi-cloud or multi-platform, it doesn't really matter. But if you're building agents on more than one framework or one infrastructure, you need to take into consideration the different identity model that platform has, right? And plan for fragmentation, because you can't assume they are consistent. And three, I really believe that static IAM breaks with agents, right? For all the reasons that I just described, okay? They are not they are not designed for adaptive workload, right? Agents need runtime control and evaluation at the moment of an action, and not just at the deploy time, okay? And if you are working on one of the platforms that we just described, please consider that on AWS, which I'm probably sure you all do it, keep reviewing your IAM role on Bedrock, okay? Making sure that the agent, the lambdas, the tools, everything that the agent is leveraging, what I call the direct and the indirect roles of the agent, and that you are aware of what that agent is capable of doing. In Azure, make sure that you can audit, okay, which one of the connectors was used in each interaction, okay? And in GCP, search for agents that are using the default service account. And if you find any in your production environment, maybe that should be your first remediation, okay? Because they are shared across the entire project. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Ido. All right, we've got time for some questions, so go ahead and submit your questions through the Q&A box here in the On24 player, and we have some time to get through a few now. So I'm just browsing through a couple of them. Well, the first question was just about presentation. So yes, Diana, this will be available after this finishes up today. You'll get a link to the recording, and then if you want the slides, we can probably work with the team over at Silverfort to get you a copy of the slides as well. Next question here. So this question is, a year from now, agents will be everywhere, more than today. If you're running identity or security, what should you be doing now so you're not scrambling later?
So, and Yoav, if you're here, then feel free to chime in whenever you want and add your take. But I think we are seeing like, let me read the question again. What will you be doing now that you answer me? So I think there is a lot of lessons that we learned as an industry from other identities, right? Usually developers catches up with the technology first, and then security comes, okay? So if we look at NHI and how to protect human identities, we already have a lot of good practices that we can apply here. And that's what I called handling the known, right? Like everything that we already know, we should be handled. And we should assume that the impact of not handling it might be much greater than not handling a thing on NHI or related to human, okay? Because agents can leverage everything that they see in ways that we couldn't expect before, okay? So whether it's finding out all your agents, setting up the right policies, company policies, I mean, having the right visibility and analysis, making sure that you're prepared for audit, making sure that you understand how you right-size permissions or how you protect them in runtime. All of these things are things that we already know. Also, we can take things like practices like understand who is the owner or attach an owner to an agent all the time and maybe connect that to HR systems as well, to do some kind of procedural on joiner mover levers. All of these things is what I like to call the known-knowns that we can already treat and work towards. And I'll admit, right, like the technology is moving in the pace that we've never seen before. And we keep having tools popping up every now and then at speed that is just crazy. So I think that will be your best approach moving forward. And maybe one last thing, just like how can you maybe treat the unknown unknowns? What I like to do is just follow the early adopters, right? So you can always follow engineers that are early adopting any AI technology and lead the space, and just think to yourself, like, what will happen to you and how you do your work if this technology would be adopted in your company as well. Yoav, there is something that you think you wanna add?
Yeah, sure. I see we have a few minutes, so I will add a few points. Something I think we see with the adoption of AI agents and AI and LLM in general is that the pressure from the executive is in a level that I didn't see before. And how it affects, I think, the security people is that because of the high pressure, it's creates a lot of island inside of your environment of usage without proper channel propagation. So it's something to really check out, like what exactly going on in my company. And it's a hard question today. You really need to like use some tools for that or have a very strong control of your environment and really understand what's going on everywhere, because you'll find people inside the go-to-market area that leverage something or bought some tool that they use, or developer that put them in production. And sometimes it's also quite hard to really understand that it's an agent behind the scene, because you can run them maybe on your machine or on the cloud, and you need the tool to understand it's not just an NHI or a human behind the scene. It's also like it's really an agent that's doing this manipulation.
Good. Thanks, Yoav, for the additional context there. A quick technical question, it looks like. Adam is wondering, what does a connector mean in this context of Azure? Do you have an example of the connector?
So, Yoav, you want to take this one first before I go?
Yeah. So, in Azure, like in all of those cloud provider, they have a lot of places you can add agents and different kind of shapes. For Azure, for example, you can use Vertex and run stuff by yourself. You can use Copilot Studio, which it's something in the middle between Azure and the broader Microsoft system. And then there in Copilot Studio, you can add, you can create connectors and connect them to your agent you created there. So, for example, it would be, let's say, you can use every MCP tool, every MCP server, and create a connector from that. But you can also have some pre-built tool for the Microsoft ecosystem or from the Microsoft Copilot Studio marketplace to connect some other vendor servers. But especially if you know what an MCP server is, so you can treat that as a connector.
Excellent. Okay, next question here. Let's say you want to understand what your agents are doing across your environment. What would you want to see, and what data matters, and what's missing today that you wish existed? Great question.
Yeah, sure. So it will probably depend, right, from each company and their needs. But for example, if you don't have a really close relationship with the builders, the ones that actually develop the agents, then you'll probably need the agent name, right? Maybe the system prompt that a little bit explain or guide the agent as a general, where you can understand a lot of information from. You want to understand what tools the agent is using or capable of using, and cross that between what it's capable and the actual usage. You want to understand if, like I said, if it's a chatbot-like interface, which we've seen in many, many companies, and probably all of us are using in our day-to-day work, then you probably, and it serves a lot of people within the organization or outside of the organization, you probably want to understand who are those people that this agent is serving and who is leveraging that, right? And then the owner itself, okay? So I like to think about this as like metadata, like the name, description, system prompt, static things, tools, name of tools, and then the active data, which is the actual usage, okay? If it makes sense. And then on top of that, you can build more and more information that is probably more specific to how your organization is working and the challenges that you are facing.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that?
Not this time.
Okay. All right. Another question here. Okay, this question on kind of visibility, I guess. Are there any well-known guidelines for discovering AI agents? Maybe some things. What do you guys do when you're talking to customers, trying to figure out, where these agents are, where they're coming from?
Yeah. So to be honest, it's I think that's the first challenge that as an industry we are facing, right? Like you have mentioned before, the pressure is so high in adopting this technology that we just have a lot of quote unquote agents running around in our environment, and now we need to somehow understand what's going on, right? So I think you can maybe try and segment the things that are really important to you, right? So if you have like an inventory of all the apps that your company is using, you can try and understand if those apps serve as an agent platform, like ChatGPT, right? You can build GPTs, it can be shared across many companies. You have maybe some automation workflows like N8N or Workato that you have some kind of a call to an LLM in the way, or maybe it's just like a feature, an AI feature that acts like an agent on top of the data that is hosted in that application. So maybe that's one layer, right? And then you have the local layer. That's where you usually find all the what all the developers are doing, right? Those are the dev tools, the cursor, the devins, the Cloud Code. It usually runs locally, but interacts with other enterprise tools that are managed probably on the cloud or one of them. And then you have all the infrastructure platforms where you actually build agents from scratch, whether it's a no-code platforms like the ones we shared, the Bedrock, the Copilot, or the complete code or the full code where you have full control, like the Vertex, the Agent Core, the Azure Foundry. And I think at least what we see, and Yoav, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that that's also like the adoption that we see, right? The easiest thing to adopt is just to buy software. So that's probably what you see is used the most. Then early adopters are usually the developers, especially in technology like that. So you see a lot of dev or co-pilot dev tools, quote unquote. And then you'll probably go to more like tools that the company wants to build for itself or for its customers using no-code platforms. And then the most advanced stage is like building something for customers using like a complete customized code like infrastructure where you do basically all of the work on your own. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah, the same viewer has a kind of a follow-up. Wants to know, what is NHI, and do you have any guidelines or frameworks to use for governing agent identity?
Yeah, so an NHI is means non-human identity. I know a lot don't work this definition because we define something, but what it's not. So everything that is not human is a NHI. And do you have any guidelines or framework for governing agent? Maybe you want to take that part.
So I don't have something I can recommend right now. I think it's a quite of evolving market, and like if you keep up to date with the speed that all of the cloud provider release features and modify their environment, it's like in a weekly base. And it's crazy that those companies with this size do that. So my only recommendation is like, if you can find like a company that can help you do that and keep you up to date, do that. And if you want to do it by yourself, I would just recommend like go to the basic, understand, like isolate the important stuff, maybe try to protect the areas that you are most afraid of, and maybe try to segregate them better, and not like try to sweep all of the option in one go, because it's quite hard.
Okay. And in terms of framework, I know there are a couple frameworks emerging. I don't know how deep they get into identity. I know the Cloud Security Alliance is doing some things with governance. So again, check out some of those. And always contact us at Security Week if we can help you research that further. Let's see here. All right, I got another question. This one is: agents don't follow scripts. They reason, branch, retry, change tools on the fly. So here's the uncomfortable question: can policies written at the config time ever secure behavior that only exists at runtime? Oh yeah, it's a juicy one.
Yes. Yeah, it's a juicy and tough one to answer. So um, I think maybe I exaggerated a little bit in the slide, but that was on purpose. Like eventually we will need like those strict rules, like those baseline kind of policies that we all fall back to, right? But it doesn't mean that we are fully protected using only that. Eventually we'll need to, how do you say it? Like grow out of them into a more sophisticated ways and take into consideration the entire context that we see at runtime. Okay, so you can think about different signals. I just shared with you like whether the owner changed, right? So maybe you trust now the agent a little bit less, and you want to have much stricter rules. Okay, maybe you have a new consumer. Again, if it's a chatbot like type of an agent, maybe you have a new consumer, and on each new consumer, you want to maybe to add a little bit of friction on what that agent can do on behalf of that consumer, right? But if it's a consumer that you're already trusting in your system, and you can understand what's the intent of that consumer and how it uses the agent, then you can trust that interaction much more, right? Or if you have a tool that was never used or the agent didn't use for a long time, right? So you want to take into consideration everything, all the context, and based on that, almost think about like a scope that keeps shrinking and expanding, giving all the different data points that you can collect at runtime.
Okay, excellent. One more question, and this one it might be a little bit challenging to answer because it's hard to understand the circumstances for everyone's environment. But the question is, how do you feel about external AIs gaining access to our cloud environment? So obviously, lots of probably questions to consider that, but if you want to take a stab at that.
So by external, I assume it's like, let's say, ChatGPT or Copilot of that sort, just connected to one of the company tools, right? I will assume that that's the use case. And I think eventually, like, unfortunately or fortunately, we won't be able to stop that. That's where the big power of this tool, that's where AI agents can really do magic, right? I know we all started a little bit skeptic of what you can do, but the more data, the more structured it is, the more information that it has, the better type of outputs it can generate and make us much more productive or create a much better experience and workflow. So I don't see us like preventing that. Having said that, we do need to put the right governance and security measurements, the more trust that we put in these tools, right? So we need to think about, just like you have said, the more we trust, maybe gradually open those tools, monitor them, make sure that the connection is not being abused, make sure that you have the right measurements to protect that interaction and connection, and do that one by one, starting with the important ones and graduate from that.
Sure. Would you consider it something almost similar to an API? You know, gaining APIs access to your environments. I mean, you're kind of giving different levels of control or access to your data. So I don't know if that would be a similar situation.
So it's like an API for agents eventually, right? I think that like there is another abstraction layer where everything is just written in plain English, so it exposed more people to use that tools rather than a simple API where usually it's more just for developers, right? Now I can do stuff in Markdown in plain English, and suddenly that agent is interacting with all of my enterprise data, and that's very powerful on its own. Right?
Absolutely.
Maybe I will just add regarding considering it as an API. I think one thing to consider is that usually when you use APIs, you do that programmatically. And hopefully your code is good, but you can also have some bugs in your code. But once it's working, it's working. And I think the unpredictable nature of agent and LLMs like force you to always monitor and make sure things are working well. It's not like it's working once, it will work again tomorrow. you'll always need to make sure nothing goes bad. So you can force the agent to just do what you want it to do and nothing else, like only give him the tool that won't damage you, but you need to do it like to make sure you do that. Otherwise, like if you give it some more control and use it in one way that working fine today, you might find out that tomorrow it's taking a different approach a bit and leveraging this capability to do something wrong.
Excellent. All right, guys. I think there's a few more kind of comment style questions in here that might be better off online. So I think that gets through the majority of our questions today. So Ido and Yoav, thank you so much for that presentation. It certainly made me aware of a few things that I hadn't thought of on my end, and very interesting. So thank you to our attendees who joined us today. Again, you'll get copies of the webinar on demand, and there's resources that go alongside some of this content. And gentlemen, I'll leave it up to you for some closing words, but from Security Week, thanks so much. Really appreciate it, and I found it very informative.
And just thank you, Mike, for hosting us. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to what Yoav and I have to say.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye-bye.